Hello, welcome everyone to another episode of the Unisolve Question. And today we have a very special guest, Julia Hanigsberg, President and CEO of Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital here in Toronto. She was with Ryerson University for, I think, 9 years before that, first as a GC, then as VP of Administration and Finance. I'm just quickly checking the LinkedIn profile. By the way, check Julia's LinkedIn profile. It just goes on and on. A lot of different interesting experiences. But just to cut to the chase, hello, Julia. How are you today?
I'm terrific, and hello, and nice to see you.
Very nice to see you. Thank you very much for coming to the show. I know that quite a few people want to hear from you and want to hear about your story. I wanted to start from your origins. I think that origins will play the crucial role in your path. Are you originally from Montreal?
I am. Well, originally actually from outside of Chicago. It's where I was born. My parents moved to Montreal when I was about 2.5 years old. So I spent my whole childhood, a lot of my early adulthood in Montreal, including going to McGill for my law degree.
At what age did you arrive to Montreal, to Canada?
Arrived to Canada just before my 3rd birthday. So September 1968, my parents arrived in Canada by car, traveling from Chicago to Montreal. So came in just to hit the fall and the winter in Montreal, but that was okay. They were living in Chicago, so they were used to windy cities and intense winters. And they settled in Montreal, and actually my parents stayed in Montreal longer than I did. They stayed in Montreal till my dad retired, and then we're very fortunate. My parents moved here to Toronto when my dad retired, so we've got a set of grandparents in town, and it's wonderful to have them so close.
You know, you mentioned driving to Canada. This struck a chord because I also arrived to Canada many years ago by car from the US. So I made a similar trek. Can you please talk about your parents? I think parents play a crucial role in one's success and one's career path. Can you tell us a little bit about your parents, please?
Sure. You know, my mom and dad were very young when they had me. So they were 20 and 21 years old. So they've always been young parents. And that's something I've actually appreciated more as I've gotten older. Of course, when I was a kid, they seemed old to me. And now I realize how fortunate I am to have had parents who even, to this day are very vital and can be really active grandparents and very part of our lives. My parents are both very intellectually engaged people. We were a household where there were always books overflowing off every surface and stacked in multiple layers on every bookshelf. They're really thoughtful people with great senses of humor, storytellers. My dad especially, you can wind him up and then you'll get a long, long tale. And, I think they really fostered in me in my entire childhood, and I'm an only child. They always demonstrated tremendous confidence in me. I never doubted for a moment that I could do anything that I set my mind to. They never doubted me for a moment, and they always encouraged me in any aspiration I had. So I think that's an incredible foundation to give your children. I remember actually when I was in law school and I was on the McGill Law Journal, which was something I was very passionate about. And in my 2nd year, I was deciding whether I would run for part of the executive. And I had been planning to run for one of the lower positions on the executive. And I remember to this day, and I've repeated it to other people, that my mother said to me, well, why wouldn't you run for the top job? Why don't you run to be editor-in-chief? Wouldn't it be fun to be the boss and to be the one who, helps steer the direction? And it was almost like the permission I needed to have the ambition to do that. And her belief that, of course, if that's what I wanted, that's what I should do. It's something that stuck with me. I've repeated that story to my kids, and it's something that I think is a bit emblematic of the kind of childhood I had, and the the kind of parenting that I was fortunate to have growing up.
Did they steer you towards any specific career path? Did they tell you that you got to be a lawyer, doctor, or something like that? Or was it just a general environment of emotional, intellectual stimulation and support?
Yeah, I would say it was very much the latter. Law school was kind of funny. We didn't have any lawyers in the family. I didn't know any lawyers. We had no close friends who were lawyers. So I didn't even, I think the clearest picture I had of what a lawyer was came from LA Law. There was, there was no direction in that sense. I think what they, and I'm not sure if they even said this explicitly, but I think the message I took from them was that education was important, that being intellectually stimulated was important, that being a knowledgeable person was important, a person who was engaged with ideas, that was really important. So for example, my undergraduate degree was in philosophy, not the most practical degree in the world. And I remember that being something that, we talked about at home all the time. The things that I was reading in my philosophy BA were things that they had read. It was all seemed very normal in my household to do a degree like that, and to learn for the sake of intellectual fulfillment rather than necessarily for the sake of practicality or career fulfillment. That being said, they were very, very proud when I got into law school.
Your parents read philosophical texts. I mean, I can't say that about many parents. I haven't polled them or tested them, but just a hunch. Were they academics?
So my father is a sociologist, a sociology professor. My mother she did her degree in classics. And so it just would be a demonstration of the kind of intellectual breadth that they had. And that continues to this day. I mean, the books they read, what they consider a light read is, an 800-page tome on some, deep intellectual matter. And, it's a pandemic. So I'm reading a lot of thrillers these days. I'm not reading a lot of deep things. And, they're people who, just love the intellectual stimulation of knowing more. They love history. It's just, it was a rich environment to grow up in, rich and varied.
Just to brag a little bit, I have a Proust tome here on my bookshelf. One of the things I do is I try to be close to interesting intellectual people. That makes me look a little bit more intellectual. Well, it's really interesting though. So you did a philosophy degree. You were a thinker early in your life. And then you went into law school. So a law school is a professional school. It's not necessarily an academic endeavor. It's not necessarily a philosophical or intellectual endeavor. People go to law school to become lawyers. They don't go to law school. Most of them don't go to law school to become academics, and you haven't become an academic. So why did you choose law school after your philosophy degree?
Yeah, so I think you're right. There are people who go to law school because they've got a very clear idea of what a lawyer is and what a law career is, and they say that's the thing I want. I think there are also a fair number of people more like me who go to law school because they're not quite sure what they want to do next, but they're good with words. They're good analytically. They've got that kind of brain. When I applied to law school, I also applied to a master's degree in English literature program. I was pretty confident that if I did the master's in English literature, I'd probably end up going to law school at some point later because I would want to get a job eventually. So I wasn't driven from a career perspective to law. And if anything, I was surprised by how much I loved it. I loved my legal education. I found it extraordinarily intellectually stimulating. I credit McGill a lot for creating a very nurturing, robust, and varied community that we were able to learn in, a community where you learned in both languages. So I did what was then called the national program. So I did my civil law courses in French. I did my common law courses in English. So I was exposed to two different legal traditions and faculty members from two different traditions and linguistic communities. My community of peers was very diverse, coming from around the country. And so it was an environment where I was exposed to extraordinary new things. I had been interested in feminism in my undergraduate degree. Certainly my mother is a feminist. It was very much the environment, again, that I grew up in. Critical feminist theory, critical race theory, all of these things were part of my legal academic path. And so, I mean, it was a very rich environment.
I'm curious, when you graduated from law school in 1991, the Soviet Union fell apart.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember those days? Did it affect you in any way, or was it a very remote event that really didn't touch you or move you much?
You know, it's a great question, and I think those events of national and international importance were impactful. I remember at the time there was a lounge in the basement of the law school. It'll take you back to know that you could smoke in that lounge. I was never a smoker, but it was a smelly place. But the other thing in that lounge, which is why I bring it up, was a big TV set. And when these moments of historically important were happening, I remember that TV set being tuned to, this was the early days of 24-hour news channels, and gathering as, a group of still very young people around the TV set, trying to understand what these tectonic international shifts meant for the world and potentially what they meant for us.
You mentioned that you went to law school because you were exploring. At least that was my reading.
Yeah.
When did you know what you wanted to do? At what point did you know that this is what I want to do? This is the path. I'm sure now. When were you sure for the first time? Can you talk about that?
Well, I'm not sure that I am yet. So it may be a bit premature to ask the question, come talk to me in another 10 years. And, you mentioned my LinkedIn profile. I think if you take a look at what I've done, it might suggest to you that I'm a person who continues to seek and has always sought out new things. I can say that probably by about second year of law school, I was really settled and realized I was loving this and it was captivated by what I was learning. I think it was all very gradual. You get different experiences, different people who impact you. You get the different opportunities. So, for example, I was, gifted an adjunct professor at McGill, Rosalie Abella. And Rosie Abella, Justice Rosie Abella, recently retiring from the Supreme Court, who I just saw last week, was an extraordinarily gifted educator. She gave me an opportunity to learn at her knee, and we made a powerful connection, a powerful intellectual connection that became a friendship that's now, I guess it's 30 years old or whatever it is. So I think you get these moments, if you're very fortunate, as I've been, where you get exposed to people, to ideas that are really meaningful. For another example, I mooted at law school. I never would have thought of myself as a mooter. Whatever I thought those people were, it wasn't my self-image, but I fell into it. I happened to enjoy it. I was encouraged to do competitive mooting. I mooted. That also gave me exposure to peers from across the country, from all the different law schools. That was really fun. I mooted in my second language. I mooted in French. That was really fun. I had the opportunity to, gain access to lots of people from the profession through that. And that probably was the beginning of me thinking that maybe I could apply to clerk at the Supreme Court, which never would have occurred to me as something that someone like me could do.
You articled at McCarthy, so you're a McCarthy's alumna, and you're one of, I think, several McCarthy's alumni who came to the show. And so McCarthy's, I talked to another guest, it's really a litigator factory, in my opinion. But the interesting thing is that this is a fairly standard elite path in this profession, an elite law school, an elite articling position, an elite clerkship. It doesn't get any more elite than that. And then the government. So the government is not traditionally considered to be necessarily an elite path or a continuation of an elite path. But as I look at your government path, I see that you made it elite. And pardon my use of that word so frequently, but I think it's a useful term because you started as counsel and then you ended as chief of staff to the Attorney General. You obviously turn whatever universe sends you into success. But did you know that when you went into the government, did you know it would be a success? Were you the kind of person who knew that this is going to be a success for me?
So, it's interesting. You're using words that are not words that I associate with myself. So that's always interesting, right? To hear somebody else reflect back to you what they see of your path. My background, you asked for my origin story. There's nothing elite in my origin story. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Montreal. We were not fancy people. We were not people of extraordinary means by any stretch of the imagination. Elite, not necessarily in my vocabulary. My parents were well educated, good schools, they met at, University of Wisconsin in Madison. They are well-educated people, but, it's just a word that I don't associate with myself. So you can hear me stumbling a little bit, even hearing you use it. I was really fortunate. I summered as a law student first at Ogilvy Renault, and then I won an academic prize sponsored by McCarthy's, and then they in meeting the folks from McCarthy's after having won that prize, I was offered a summer job there, and that became an articling position before I clerked. The clerkship was an extraordinary experience. It's the ultimate wonderful, intellectual, engaging experience for young lawyers. Probably, the best thing you could have done. I also met my husband there, so it had some good knock-on effects in my life, transformed my life in many, many ways. You asked a question about government, and I'll just, I'll take issue with your premise, if you don't mind. Some of the most gifted lawyers this country has ever created, has ever benefited from, are lawyers in our government. You look at and you read your constitutional case law, you see the names over and over and over again. Those charter litigators, those lawyers who were, part of, bringing the Constitution back to Canada, those are government lawyers. So I actually never thought of government as a second choice at all. I fought hard to get my government job. I came into my first government job working at the Ministry of the Attorney General, 720 Bay Street in Toronto, on a 6-month contract, not as counsel because there were no counsel jobs to be had. So I came in as a policy advisor. I made about $30,000 a year at the time. And I felt lucky to have it, really lucky to have it. Because I'd seen, all those Ontario v. whomever cases throughout law school. I'd seen those names. So from the very beginning, I was very honored to be able to be part of shaping law in Ontario. I was never in litigation, although that would have been an early obvious path for me. But the opportunity came in policy, and that became a really fun experience, the ability to shape laws, shape regulations, shape where the government is going. So, and then as you said, one of the greatest things about government, and I said this to so many people, is the variety of careers you can build within government, the vastness of it. Even just if a lawyer's path can take so many different trajectories. And so mine was one that, took a certain trajectory, was involved with some pretty high profile policy development, in particular around same-sex rights. So after the M versus H case in Ontario, the Court of Appeal case that was pivotal in Ontario, we had the legislative policy development process. I ended up leading that process for the Ministry of the Attorney General, and that created a pathway for me that I was worked hard and was fortunate to be able to follow.
Did the government end up being your CEO school? That because you were a chief of staff at the end. It's a little bit like CEO, no?
Yeah, it's a great question. No one's ever asked me that. I've never really thought about it that way, but I think you're right. It was the first big leadership role where there's a lot of money at stake. There are a lot of people. There are a lot of stakeholders of tremendous variety. It was a huge cauldron of learning under extraordinary pressure. And I think you're right. I'd never thought about it that way. Thank you for that. Thank you for the illumination you just provided me.
I'm very happy to have contributed something. But after 8 years with the government, you went into higher education. You went to Ryerson. So what happened there? You said a few minutes ago that you're still exploring. Were you still exploring when you went into education?
Yeah, it was a great time. I had when I accepted the role of chief of staff to the then Attorney General, I said, I'll do it for 6 months. I'll get you set up in the office. I'll hire your team for you. And then, of course, 2 years later, I was still doing it. And it's a lot. There's a reason the people who do those jobs tend to be young. I had a young family. It was a lot, and it was time to give somebody else a chance to do that big, great, intense job. And I really didn't know what would come next. I explored some opportunities within government, and they didn't feel like the right step. Potentially now I'm thinking, because I'd had that CEO-like experience and other things didn't seem like they would be as impactful. And so I had a great opportunity. I went to Osgoode as a visiting professor for 6 months, and allowed me to co-teach a course, which was great, work on some strategic planning with the then Dean Patrick Monahan, now Mr. Justice Monahan. But more so than ever, it allowed me to meet with hundreds and hundreds of people over that 6 months period. And, I know you've met my husband, and I remember one day Lauren saying to me, so who are you breakfasting with, lunching with, coffeeing with, dining with, drinking with today, dear? Because that was what my day looked like. And people are amazing. People are so generous. You reach out to someone and you say, I'm here's who I am. I'm looking to make a change in my career. I don't quite know what it is. Would you sit down with me? And people do. People sit down with you. And then when you say after, you spend half an hour with them, is there anybody else you think I should talk to? They say, sure. They connect you with 3 other amazing people, and away you go. And before you know it, you're just meeting, talking to just incredible people. And so I used that 6 months to really try to figure out what was next. And ultimately, there were a few people who were really pivotal in that discussion, including some great lawyers. And there were a couple of factors. One was it was a time of historic investment in post-secondary education in Ontario. Money helps. Things happen in a sector when there's some money. It was also a time of a kind of unprecedented turnover in leadership. So in Toronto, in the 4 universities in Toronto, 3 of them were appointing new presidents at that time: U of T, York, and Ryerson. And that seemed kind of interesting, this sort of almost generational change happening. And what would that mean? And so I was connected to 2 of those new presidents and talked to 2 of them. And Sheldon Levy at Ryerson was the person that I thought, boy, I will learn so much from this guy. And it was the smartest decision I've ever made, and the most accurate intuition I've ever had, in that there wasn't a single meeting, a single discussion, single anything where I was with him that I didn't learn and get better at my job and develop skills that I use to this day every single day.
I'm looking at your career path, and I'm looking at you. By any standard, by any measure, you're a successful person. You are a healthcare leader in Ontario, or in Canada, I would say. I mean, if you're a leader, if you're a healthcare leader in Ontario, you're a healthcare leader in Canada for sure, and even in North America. This is a fantastic hospital that you are leading today, and you have been leading this hospital, Holland Bloorview, for I believe 6 years now.
Yeah, it'll be 7 years in January.
You're a hospital CEO. You active on various boards. You're active in the community. And you have a nice husband, so he's a pretty nice guy that
nice guy.
Apparently everybody likes. So after
everybody likes Lauren.
Just
yes.
For the audience, my previous interview was with Lauren Sauce and Justice of the Court of Appeal for Ontario. And after I posted that interview, it was just a stream of people basically giving tribute and saying, I love him, I love him, I love him, right? So you obviously have the ability.
Being married to such a man.
Exactly. So you have the ability to meet people like that and gain their trust and build a family together, right? And then you're also a mother. Mm-hmm. I think you have 3 children. Yeah. I follow you on Instagram, I have to admit. So I remember one of your posts where you posted a screenshot of your alarms, and it was shocking. I think they started like at 4 a.m. or something like that. So, and there were 5 or 10 of them, and you had different alarms for different things. So you are a success by any measure, by any standard, but your path is not what has traditionally been prescribed to those who seek success in this profession. So the path that has traditionally been prescribed to us is find a good law firm, stick around, make partner, and build your law practice at that law firm in private practice, right? Do great cases if you're a litigator, have great clients, go to the Supreme Court, argue at the Supreme Court. You haven't done any of that. And you are registered with the Law Society, but you're registered as a non-practicing lawyer. You're not practicing law anymore. So for all of our listeners who are lawyers today, or who are law students, or who left law, please tell us what person qualities, what patterns can you identify in your decision-making over the years? What strategies can you identify over the years that took you down this path and still culminated in what is undoubtedly enormous success? I mean, there's nobody in this world that, I don't care what elite firm they work at, I don't care how many Supreme Court of Canada cases they argued, who can say that you're not a successful lawyer, right? So what is it about your decisions over the years, your personal qualities, your culture, whatever it is that took you down this path and culminated in this success?
I think something, so thank you. It's really something to hear yourself described in those ways. I have worked hard over the years. I've also been very fortunate. I think about the basket of things that I just started out with. First thing is the color of my skin, the place that I was born, the country that I live in, the parents that I have, all things that I didn't earn, that I just get to kind of, the big box I get to stand on as my starting point. So that's the beginning, right? And that's nothing I earned. I'd say something Lauren and I have in common, Lauren probably even more than me, is not being focused and certainly not exclusively focused on traditional definitions of success. I remember a long time ago when someone was trying to get Lauren to apply for a job. And a mutual friend of ours was calling me because Lauren wasn't doing it. So he's like, how can we get Lauren to do this? And the answer was not by appealing to vanity or ego or ambition, because those are not the things that motivate him. Those may be the things that motivate you, but it's not going to motivate him. So if that's what you're using, you're not going to get there. So I think that throughout these career paths, take going to Ryerson. The other university that I talked to at the time was, one could argue, many would say, the more elite university in Toronto. I saw the scrappy university, the university president who was not cut from the same mold as everybody else, but who I knew that there was a lot to learn from. Look at Ryerson in the 9 years that I was there, and Ryerson since then, right? Look at the reputation of that place. Look at how it has changed post-secondary education. You know how every university has incubators and accelerators now? It was the first one in Canada. That was Ryerson. No one did that before Ryerson. So I think, if one always chooses the elite or the obvious path to success, I think often you end up making decisions that aren't good for you, and probably not good for that place either. So, I think probably the thread for me is curiosity. Where am I going to learn stuff that I don't know now? It's people. Where are there people who are going to be with which I can form a community, and from whom I'll learn, who can learn from me, where I can make impact, where I will be valued. Those are probably the two biggest things that have always impacted me, and it's the same here at Holland Bloorview. It's this community. It's what this place does. It's the ability to make impact. We're growing our research institute right now. We're going to have the highest concentration of researchers in the field of childhood disability in the world. My ambition, my desire for the success of this organization and the people who make up this community is limitless. My desire for my own success is not the thing that gets me up in the morning. It's not to say, I'm not disputing that by most the kinds of criteria people look at, that I'm successful, and I'm grateful for that success, and it makes a good deal of impact in my life. But it's not the thing that gets me up every day in the morning. And so I suppose that's the thing that I would say, and it's the thing that we said to our own children. Our children are now young adults. It's the thing that I've said to friends and family when I talk about their own children and decisions their kids shouldn't are making around which university to go to, and I can't believe my kid he wants to go to this place rather than this place. Shouldn't they go to this university? And the first thing I always said is, well, what drives them? What motivates them? What's the environment where they're going to feel the most motivated and successful? Don't go from the top 10 lists of universities. Look at your kid, look at their individual passions and motivations, and find the right fit. I'd say the same thing to anybody.
Do you think your parents did something different from what we as parents do today? Do you think, I guess what I'm getting at is, do you think kids are not what they used to be like 30, 40 years ago?
Yeah. So yes, although I'm not sure it's all about what our parents did. I know that my children, in a lot of senses, are much more practical in their orientation than either my husband or I were at their age. Now, that being said, when I went to law school at McGill, my tuition was $850 a semester. Mm-hmm. Not a lot was riding on that decision. My success or not, how much salary when I graduated, not a lot was riding on that decision. Right now, where, goodness knows what law school, I sort of know, I don't even want to utter those numbers because they're so shocking. If law school had cost back then what it costs now, I would never have gone to law school because I wasn't committed enough to the law. I wasn't passionate enough. I discovered it by being in it. So I think the pressures on young people today are much different than they were when I was coming up. And I think it makes it much harder for them to take risks. take risks in their education. The gambles are very expensive. And I think they look at the economy, they look at all the different factors. If you live in Toronto, they look at the cost of a house in Toronto and they think, oh my goodness, how am I ever going to do this? The pressures are enormous. So I think as parents, you try to do what you can to mitigate that. Try to encourage them to still follow their passions if they can. But also, I think another thing, that we've talked about as a family, is that there are lots of ways to express your passions. Some people get to do it from 9 to 5. It's their day job, is their passion. Other people, work at a job that they're good at and they believe they make impact and it's fulfilling, but their passion comes from their community involvement. It comes from their volunteerism. It comes from what they try to raise money for. It comes from whatever else it is. So there are lots of ways to make a full and satisfying life. And I think as a parent, what we've tried to do, what I've tried to do is create as broad a universe as possible for our children, to imagine what success would look like for them, what pride in them would look like for us. So we're not limiting their universe, we're expanding their universe, and then support them in the choices they make.
Thank you so much. In conclusion, I would really appreciate if you could say a few encouraging words to all those lawyers who are not sure right now, who are a little bit stuck or maybe a lot stuck, and who we are living a time of change, huge transformation. People don't have confidence. They are not certain about tomorrow.
Yeah.
Hearing something from you would be great.
Yeah. So I tell you that, like you said, I'm a non-practicing lawyer. I value that legal education and that legal training every single day. And I would say to all those lawyers who are listening to this, that you have an extraordinary toolbox at your disposal. You may not recognize it. You have tools that other people don't have, and you can use those tools in all sorts of different professional capacities. So if the thing you are using your toolbox for right now is not motivating to you, is hard on you, and you don't think it's your path, don't think that means you have to toss out the toolbox and find yourself a new one. You can use those tools to take you in extraordinary directions. I've seen it in my own career. I've seen it in so many other people's careers. So have confidence that you know the things you need to know to do a vast array of important and impactful things.
Thank you so much, Julie. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Thank you so much.